So we are delighted to welcome Natalie Ko, who is the news editor at the South China Morning Post and is joining us from Hong Kong, actually. And in 2018, Natalie led a winning team at the company's hackathon with a business proposal to improve on the gender representation in the news. And today, she will be telling us all about how she managed to persuade the senior management and work with teams across the organization to bring this project to life. So welcome, Natalie, to our NIS audience, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Charlene, and thank you, Vera, and thank you so much, EJC, for giving me this opportunity to begin with. I'm so happy to be here. So hi everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here, speaking to you from the South China Morning Post, which is an English publication in Hong Kong, and I'm here to talk to you about Lunar, which is our initiative that we introduced to improve women representation in our news coverage. As everyone knows, all over the world, there has been like a huge push for stronger representation for women, minorities, the LGBT community. And while Asia is generally a little bit more conservative than the West, there is a huge push for this too here, particularly in Hong Kong, which is very international. We're very diverse. So as Charlene said, a few years ago, a group of us at the SCMP, we pitched a business proposal to improve female representation, not just in the newsroom because we already had gender parity, but also in the way we were presenting the news. So that's us with our CEO, Gary, on my left. So basically, it was a hackathon. It was actually the company's inaugural hackathon where we had, I think, like 10 minutes to pitch a business idea to a panel. And if it made sense to them, we would be invited to the senior management offsite to pitch to the top leadership in the company. And fortunately, the idea really resonated with them. And we were among the 3 winners for the hackathon. And senior management approved our proposal and incorporated it into the next financial year's plans, which was really empowering for us because having support from senior management to improve women representation, that really made things a lot easier for us because they set concrete goals. For instance, we had to achieve something like 38% female readership, and that really gave motivation to editors to support our initiative. And most importantly, it showed that the company was willing to break the status quo, which gave reporters hope, not just for gender representation, but for other minority rights as well. So how did we persuade senior management? So we went very hard on data because I come from a strong digital background and strong. I'm very experienced with data analytics. So we went into our GA and we looked at the number of female readers we had versus male readers. And as you can see, we had twice as many male than female readers at the time, which left a huge gap for potential female readers left untapped. And for a news organization, traffic is, of course, very important to us, and finding an undertapped segment in the market was very valuable. And as you can see, if we had like 12 million male readers and then only 6 million female readers, there's this huge gap that is left untouched. And, if we felt that if we just changed the way we were presenting women and introduce some new ideas, that could really help us step into this market. And we also used our qualitative data. So on the right, you could see some results from a survey we did for our editors and reporters. We reached out to them to see what they thought about our gender representation. And our survey found that most people in the newsroom thought that including women voices was really important to them, but only half of them were making a conscious effort to include women voices in their stories. So if we pull out like that segment, there is a larger proportion of those who agreed that including women voices was important, and that they actually did consciously do it. But then there was still, a third of people who said that they did not consciously reach out to women to include women voices in their stories, even though they thought it was important. So we sought to find out, how we could help our reporters make their jobs a little bit easier. Some of the main findings we found from our survey is that there was a very poor understanding of what women were looking for. And 43% said that they really wanted some survey data to know what exactly women wanted to read. And then there was a very focus on producing good stories. But I think those were mainly the like male respondents who thought that it wasn't important to look for women. But then that was also a very small minority who did that. On the topic of sourcing more female experts, 62% believe that there simply weren't enough female experts to interview, which is not true. And 60% said that they didn't have the time to look for female experts. Some other problems that people raised were also that they do not actively look for these women to interview, and the women that they did reach out for interview tend to say no. Some people also knew that there were already existing expert lists that they could tap into, but they faced some issues. Like 30% of them said that it was not accessible by industry, it was hard to maneuver, and that us being an Asia-based publication, we needed people awake during Asia times to interview, whereas most of the expert lists that exist were sort of US-based. So that was a problem for them. We also did an analysis of the newsroom. We wanted to change the way we were representing women in our coverage. So we looked at the gender parity in our newsroom. So in terms of senior leadership, we're pretty okay. Like we were about 50-50. In fact, I think we may have a few more women than men in senior leadership. In the newsroom, actually, our editor-in-chief is a woman and our deputy executive editor is a woman as well. So we were doing really well there. But then when it came to like the experts that we were interviewing, only one woman was interviewed for every 4 male experts, and for our opinion pieces, we only had one woman columnist for every 5 men. So we really wanted to change that. And based on our survey, we wanted to know what stories women were interested in. And I always say that the beauty of digital is the access to data, which has given us insights to our readers literally at our fingertips. So we looked at the content here, and we found that women were very interested in human interest stories and shared experiences from other women. It's a bit of a no-brainer to know that women wanted to read about other women. And we also noticed that women were particularly interested in events that had a direct impact on people's lives, such as the typhoon, floods, and COVID-19. In fact, when COVID-19 hit, like at the peak of the pandemic, we achieved near parity of female readership of about 47%. And then as time went on, we also started to find that women were reading diplomacy and regional news stories. So not just soft news, like what people thought women were reading, but actually hard news as well. So that really pointed to how the way we presented news really did affect women readership. So based on our survey and our data, we set out to do 3 main things: provide access to women experts, create content for women, and track our results. To improve access to women, we decided to develop our own women expert list that addressed the problems raised in the survey. We had Asia-based experts verified independently by a team within the newsroom and with contact information like cell phone numbers and email. And we grew this list by allowing people to nominate themselves and nominate others. So this was actually really effective and powerful because we found that a lot of women were uncomfortable with self-promotion. So having someone else nominate them gave them the confidence to be willing to be featured in the list. And to create content for women, we used the data we found and tried to develop stories about women for women. At the same time, we encouraged reporters and editors to include women voices as much as possible, not just in terms of experts, but also, for example, if we were doing a story about small business owners in Shanghai, we wouldn't want to just interview male business owners. We would want to include female business owners as well. And then we also created a weekly newsletter called Lunar, curating all these stories that we send out every Friday. Lastly, we wanted to be data-driven. So we worked with our tech team to create an internal tagging system. Basically, it's a tag that editors should use whenever they include women voices in the story. And we made the rules as simple as possible. As long as the story included a woman that we had interviewed, click the tag. This didn't include stories based off statements from women leaders like Jacinda Ardern or Angela Merkel, because we wanted to track stories where reporters and editors were actually making a conscious effort to reach out to women specifically. So this is our an example of our newsletter. This was last week's newsletter, I believe, and you can just scan that QR code and check it out, sign up, and find out more about it. Basically, it goes out every Friday at 4 p.m. Hong Kong time, which I believe it's morning in Europe. And we also have a referral program which gives some free tote bags and stickers if you refer your friends. And basically, it's just a curation of the stories that featured women the past week. We curate it in this newsletter, and then we send it out every Friday. So these are some of the examples of content we've created with Lunar in mind. This is biased because I'm on the China desk, so most of the stories I feature here are China-based, but we do offer a very wide breadth of stories from Asia, including Southeast Asia, Hong Kong, South Asia, etc. The aim here was really to empower women in the newsroom to speak out and pitch stories about underserved communities. We should never underestimate the value of community. I think reporters were really bolstered by the fact that there was support within the newsroom and finding out that, the other reporters and editors felt really strongly about these stories. So the story on the left about period poverty, this one was really interesting because this actually came up in a discussion with the other China reporters. Like, it didn't even come out as a pitch. Like, we had this shared channel among the China reporters for just women, and one of them just shared this story and said, "Hey, this is NGO, in this very rural part of China, helping out girls who can't afford sanitary products." And then I looked at it and I was like, you know what, this is a really good story. We should do a story about this because we want to feature women voices, and this is a very real problem. People who are so poor they can't afford sanitary products, and what this NGO is doing to help them. So that worked, and yeah, we were very happy with this story. And then the second story, what I loved about it is that we actually featured a woman breastfeeding as a hero image, which it's not something I thought would have happened 5 years ago. But I think this was an effect of Lunar, the fact that we knew senior management would be in support of this. We are editors pushing for this. We, pushing for things like having a women's stories, normalizing very female things like breastfeeding. I think that was really important. And yeah, I really love that we had this photo as our hero image. So that was great. And then the last story was about, so originally the report was about younger Chinese choosing to lead single lives. But if you think about it, it's actually a very female story. It's a woman's story. It's a big part of why younger people could afford to marry later is because women were, gaining financial independence. We weren't dependent on men anymore. We didn't have to marry men to go far in life. So this obviously contributed to young millennials in China choosing single lives. And so we went with that angle and it did really well. So we were really happy with that. So of course, to achieve all these things, we had to work with multiple stakeholders within and outside of the company. I'm a big believer of initiatives coming from within. So we really wanted to empower people in the newsroom. So in the middle, you have the reporters, the editors, and the senior management. But we also worked really well with the other stakeholders in the company. For example, our partnerships team managed to get us a partnership with the Women Foundation, and that entails sort of like we feature a quote from one of their members in the newsletter every week. And they also played a really big part in nominating women experts for our list. So that was great. Our events team was also really supportive. We had plans for Lunar events, to feature women in Asia. But unfortunately, COVID-19 happened and that has been delayed. But, we really appreciate the support that the events team gave us. Our data team was so great, so supportive. They created dashboards that are like all over televisions in the newsroom, so everybody can sort of see like how many women are reading our stories or how many women are reading, China's. And our marketing team was very supportive as well. They were pushing in-house ads to drive newsletter signups, and they introduced that referral program that gave tote bags for every X number of referrals. So it was really like a whole company effort, and yeah, we worked really well. So that was really great. Some of the other things we have done, we really wanted to improve gendered language. So previously, the word chairwoman didn't exist in our style guide. Like the chairperson was always assumed to be male. So we pushed to change that in our style guide. So now we can actually call a chairwoman. Although personally, I would prefer it to be gender neutral, to have it, chairperson, but then it's just part of our style. We don't say chairperson or spokesperson, but at least now we can say chairwoman and spokeswoman. So that's a little battle won there. We also wanted to include women voices in stories as much as possible, whether they are women experts or providing stories from a woman's perspective. For example, we did stories about domestic violence during COVID-19. And as I mentioned, millennials choosing to remain single. That's a very women's story, actually. And, we went with that. And then sex assault stories. So years ago, it was quite difficult to get these assault stories published because, well, it just wasn't part editors at the time didn't know how to deal with these sort of stories. And then the Me Too movement happened, and that definitely helped us. The newsroom definitely started taking stories about women much more seriously. And the more we did these stories, the more we, finalize a system or fine-tune the system to decide whether or not the story should be reported on and how we should report on it. So before, the answer was always no, let's not do such a sticky story like this. But now, we have like an informal checklist. We look at who's being accused. Has there been a pattern of allegations against this person? Are they pressing charges? Has there been a statement? Has he been fired from his job? Is there a court case going on? Do they have a lawyer? Have we spoken to third-party lawyers for their views? And the fact that now that there is actually a conversation between reporters and editors about whether or not to report on these stories, that's already a huge step forward. Because before, the answer was almost always no. Now there is actually a chance of these stories getting through. So communicating Lunar in the newsroom, it wasn't too difficult for us. As I said, we went through this by a hackathon, and the hackathon was actually held like right in the middle of the newsroom, which was a little bit embarrassing, but then that got everyone's attention. And also because we did the survey, so everyone sort of already knew that we were pushing for this. And even then, we had a lot of support. Like people were so encouraging. We had such so many words of encouragement from the reporters. So that was great. We hold monthly meetings with representatives from each team, both inside the newsroom and outside the newsroom to, make sure things are going on track. We constantly enforce best practices. I'm always checking to see if stories have been tagged. Like if you interview a woman, did you tag it properly? Are we pushing these stories? It's a continuous process. So I think the most important thing to think about when we do these is to not get bogged down if things fall through the cracks. Like these transformations don't happen overnight. Like it really is a continuous process. Sometimes things are going to happen. Sometimes we still get complaints like, oh, we just ran a story that's a little bit sexist, and then, oh, like, why did this person say this in the company group chat? It's so sexist. Like, I think it's really important to remain positive and don't get bogged down. Like things are improving. Like as long as things are moving forward, that's always a good sign. And I think we really sought to create a strong community. With, like I mentioned, on China Desk, we had this Slack channel, which is just us women, like female reporters and editors. And we are, sharing stories, we're sharing ideas. If there's something that's making us uncomfortable if there's something that's making us uncomfortable, we share it there and we sort of support each other and we talk through to see, oh, is this really, is this something we should address? Is this something we should take higher up? And that's, I think, very, very powerful for us. So in terms of results, so in 2018, when we first pitched it, we only had 33% female readership, and then we were set a target of 37%. And now we're actually at 44% female readership. So that's really, really positive for us. I mean, I always think that we always need to have readers at the center of everything we do. I mean, that's the point of journalism. And we just can't ignore 50% of the population. People respond to seeing themselves represented in the media. And if you represent women in our coverage, we are going to get an uptick in is in the pudding. So if you think about like what more can be done, obviously I feel like we have made really good steps forward, but there are other things. Right now we're working on the four of this list. So this list is actually from One IFRA, which I find a very useful resource. They have a gender balance guidebook, they have a handbook, they have a sexual harassment toolkit, and I kind of wish this existed 2 years ago when we were starting out the idea, because we didn't really know what exactly to do. We just kind of like figured it out looking at what other news outlets were doing, like New York Times, Financial Times, Bloomberg. And then we took inspiration for that, and then we formulated our own sort of plans based on what other people were doing. But then this checklist is actually really useful. So you could kind of use this to as an audit to see where your newsroom is at, and you if there's any more improvements you can do or introduce to the newsroom. So right now for us at the SCMP, I think we're working on the first four, which is making sure we regularly review content to make sure there's no gender bias. We are developing that database base of contacts for women experts. And yeah, we already have gender parity for senior management. But for the others, I feel like it would be useful if newsrooms, had a very specific sexual harassment policy or an agenda policy and regular trainings to teach staff what exactly is gender bias. How do you recognize it? Are you doing it, subconsciously? So I think this checklist is very, very useful. And yeah, that's all I have for you today. So thank you so much for having me. You can scan these QR codes to find out more about Lunar. So first one is an overview. It's like a little snippet of exactly who we are, what we are doing. The second one is for the sign up. If you're interested, please sign up, and it's good content. And the third is a look at our expert nomination contact form, and there's a little like a note from our editor-in-chief as well, so that gives you some insights as well to where we're coming from. And yeah, that's all. So thank you so much.
Yes, because you mentioned that with your initiative, you created awareness in the younger generations. But my question is, what about the older generations? Have you seen an impact on the women from 40 to 60? That you created a debate in the society as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think even within the newsroom, I think because like the sort of the older women in the newsroom, they are supportive, but because they're kind of used to, being in a newsroom for the past 40 years, 30, 40 years, where like the norm is very male, is very patriarchal, I suppose. And I think they were very used to that. So when this Me Too movement started, and then us younger women came out and we were very vocal and we were all very supportive of each other, I think that really like something like changed in them. Like they started to see things a little bit differently. So definitely we have the support of all the women in the newsroom, even the older ones. And like I mentioned, my editor-in-chief and some of the senior editors are female, and they were like the biggest supporters. Like the look of pride from my editor-in-chief's eyes when we were presenting was like really, really, yeah, it was very touching. Like she was just so happy that there was the group of us who cared so much and put in so much thought for this. So yeah, it definitely, we did see a shift in the older generation.
That's great to hear. We have here a question from Claire Kerautren. I will show you here on the screen. She says, your initiative and approach sound very promising. Do you think you'll try to broaden the reach to papers in neighboring regions and neighboring countries?
Oh, I mean, definitely, if the opportunity arises for us to work together, we definitely would want to do that. I mean, when we first started this as well, like we reached out to other papers, well, not just papers, but like publications that have already done this. Like people from Bloomberg, from ABC, to find out, and BBC as well, to find out what they were doing. And they were all so supportive. They gave us tips. They told us some of the ideas they had, the plans they had. So that was really promising, and we would definitely want to pay it forward. If the opportunity arises, we would we would definitely, want to work with these other papers as well.
We have another question from Sabrina Tsai. Sabrina asks, Natalie, what was the biggest challenge that you were facing when introducing Luna?
The biggest challenge was, I think there was some people who didn't really quite get what we were trying to do. There was like a few people who said, like, why are we supporting women only? Like, why don't we support like everyone? Why don't we support, minorities, LGBT? And for us, it was like, I mean, we hear you, we agree, we definitely want to do that. But like, for right now, like this particular project, this is what we're looking for. And we could always use this as like a case study to extend it to other minorities that we want to represent or cover as well. So I think there wasn't really pushback or anything like that. Like no one said like we should not do this. But I think it was difficult trying to get people to kind of understand where we were coming from and the good that could come out of it.
We have here a question from our director, Adam Thomas. So Adam asks, hi, Natalie. Getting the support of management is often flagged as one of the most challenging aspects of diversity initiatives. What is your top tip for getting senior managers and editors on board?
So I think what really worked for us is that we looked at it from a business perspective, because senior management, like your CEO and they are there to drive the business. They are there to drive profit. So what I thought worked best for us is that we looked at the data and we told them that this is a huge gap in the segment that we're not tapping, and that was a very big business opportunity for them, because for a publication, traffic is money. The more people you get to your website, the more money you earn, basically. So telling them that, look, if we don't change the way we represent women, we are, we're losing out on this huge chunk of women who could be reading our news, but they aren't because they're not interested in us right now. So I think that really worked for us, bringing it back to a business perspective and using data to prove your point.
Thank you, Natalie. We don't have many questions. I mean, no, we don't have more questions. So thank you so much, Natalie, for being here today. Thank you for your great presentation, and see you soon, hopefully.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Angela. Thank you for having me. Have a good day.
Sure. Bye.
Thank you so much, Natalie. That was amazing to see a presentation that brings together data, audience, gender. Very, very interesting project, Lunar. We wish you all the best.